Why is the most mysterious building of mankind, the Great Pyramid, still hardly studied? Why even in the 21st century, we still rely on data from 160 years ago, today, about Charles Piazzi Smyth, the man who was the first to seriously measure the Great Pyramid, and believe that it was built according to divine instructions. Over the many years, I have been contacted for various data on the Great Pyramid, and too often I have to reply that the data simply does not exist. By and large, Egyptology show little interest on such structures and the problems that they bring. Indeed, I would argue that Egyptology has yet to explore the pyramids. This viewpoint is based on the numerous guides and research which I have undertaken on the pyramid complexes. Modern Egyptology seems content with this old data and appears to see no reason to explore these structures through a modern lens. Possibly, especially in the case of the Great Pyramid, the intense interest which surrounds it from the outside world, along with the various theories to explain its existence, has made Egyptologists somewhat wary to take up the subject matter. You will not find a multi-volume book on the Great Pyramid from Egyptology which goes into great detail on the structure. For such detail, one has to look to sources from pyramidology. Pyramidology would likely be described by Egyptologists as a pseudoscience who would describe the proponents of such theories as pyramidiates. The above quote can apply to the vast majority of pyramid complexes, and as bad as our knowledge is on the Great Pyramid, the situation is often more acute on other pyramid complexes. What is the cause of this failure of scholarship? I suspect it is down to the makeup of Egyptology, which is too heavily geared to students of humanities subjects. These subject areas seem to largely influence Egyptology institutions, whilst architectural study, along with the associated engineering challenges, is omitted. Egyptology needs to divert resources from the humanities and recruit engineers and architects to undertake more modern exploration of the structures. Unfortunately, such correction is unlikely, and the status quo will be maintained. Certainly my experience with engineers, architects, stonemasons, etc., over the years is a recurring sense of frustration on the scant data available. Sadly, this data is unlikely to improve, or if it does, at glacial speed. Access to the structures is tightly controlled. Gone are the days when pyramidologists had free rein to explore. A good example is the Edgar brothers. Although pyramidologists, they did supply some fine data and early photography of the Great Pyramid. Today, only Egyptologists have access, and so the world awaits data that only they can provide. But if the discipline does not have the necessary skill sets or interest, we will forever be beholden to data from the 19th century. Piazzi Smyth was born in Naples on the 3rd of January, 1819, an era in which Napoleon was still in exile on St. Helena. His father, William Henry Smyth, was an officer in the Royal Navy who saw action in the Napoleonic Wars. On the cessation of the war in 1815, he spent 10 years creating a survey of the Mediterranean coast. It was at this time that he became close friends with the Italian astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi and developed a keen interest in astronomy. In Sicily, William would marry Annarella Warrington, daughter of the English consul, and they would create a sizable family of 3 sons and 6 daughters, with Charles being the second born. Charles' middle name, Piazzi, was to honor his godfather, Giuseppe Piazzi, and indeed, during his adult life, he chose to be known as Piazzi among family and friends. In 1824, after completing his Mediterranean survey, William would retire from the Royal Navy, eventually rising to the rank of admiral, and return to England, where he could engage more time to his interest in astronomy. His Majesty's astronomer at the Royal Observatory at the Cape of Good Hope became available. He soon found himself at the young age of 16, setting sail on a 59-day voyage to the Cape. Piazzi would spend some 10 years at the Cape, a very productive time, not only in astronomy, but also in early photography, which would come to good use much later at Giza. Whilst in South Africa, he would also become friends with the engineer William Petrie, the father of Flinders Petrie, who was born on 3rd June, 1853. Piazzi was 34 when Flinders was born. Piazzi's time at the Cape would come to an end, due to the death of the Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Thomas Henderson. Due to the distance and communication delays, Piazzi's father applied for the vacant position in his son's name. His candidature was further supported by Sir John Herschel. Piazzi would take up his new position as the Astronomer Royal for Scotland in January 1846. On Christmas Eve, 1855, Piazzi would marry Jessica Duncan, who had a keen interest in geology and would assist Piazzi in his many overseas expeditions, including his work at the Great Pyramid. Piazzi was quite busy in his new post, and one of his first expeditions with Jessica was to Tenerife to assess the effectiveness of astronomical observations from the clearer atmosphere of mountaintops, an idea that was ahead of its time. What got Piazzi so interested in the Great Pyramid is not so clear. His father had a keen interest in ancient Egypt, and Piazzi was quite familiar with the latest news and developments on ancient Egypt. At this time, Piazzi appears quite indifferent to Taylor's book, though things seem to change some years later after the publication of another article by Taylor, Battle of the Standards, 1864. This publication highlighted the virtues of the imperial measuring system against what he would see as the inferior French metric system, along with a hefty sprinkling of religious fervor and the Great Pyramid. Taylor would state, "From what has been said in the preceding pages, it will be perceived that a divine revelation was made to mankind, of which the Great Pyramid is the record, about 700 years before the revelation of which the Pentateuch is the record." Piazzi was a supporter of the imperial system, as was his friend John Herschel, who lobbied Parliament against the introduction of the metric system. In the Battle of the Standards, Taylor reprinted, with the author's permission, a letter from Herschel, which was originally published in the Athenaeum. This dealt with a British modular standard of length, being superior to the French meter, which was assumed to be the 10 millionth part of the quadrant of the Earth's elliptic meridian passing through Paris. Herschel's solution was to use the polar axis, which he gave a value of 500 million, 500,000 inches. He states, "This, then, is the fractional error of our modular unit in proportion to its own length of 1.001 British Standard Inch, or that of a module of 50.05 such inches, which in this view of the subject might be taken for the British unit of linear measure, or 1/10 millionth of the Earth's axis." In the same letter, he would comment on Taylor's earlier book, which brought forward the Degina relationship of the Great Nine. Ibid, page 99. Battle of the Standards, 1864, page 14. Ibid, page 40. Pyramid, which he described as an accidental coincidence, and acknowledges Taylor's mention of the British inch and polar axis. Such puzzles likely intrigue Piazzi to explore farther, and in his 1880 edition of Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid, his wife penned an appendix, biographical notice of John Taylor, in which Jessica writes, soon after their publication as above, in his remarkable work, The Great Pyramid, Why Was It Built? A copy was sent by mutual friend to Piazzi Smyth in Edinburgh. He, fancying it applied more to architecture than to his own professional line of occupation, astronomy, forwarded the book to the Architectural Institute of Edinburgh, with a request that they would look into it and report accordingly. This, however, they seem to have totally failed to do, and therefore, in 1863, when the same friend forwarded a copy of Mr. Taylor's second and smaller work, The Battle of the Standards of Linear Measure, Piazzi Smyth immediately gave his mind conscientiously to it, and finding so much of well-digested matter, stated ably and fearlessly with regard to astronomically founded weights and measures and other kindred points, he at once procured a copy of The Great Pyramid, Why Was It Built? Studied it carefully, tested some features crucially, and finally came to the conclusion that on the whole Mr. Taylor had well-grounded reasons for his bold assertion, which had frightened away half his friends, viz. that the Great Pyramid must have been erected under divine instructions to its architect. Before Piazzi and Jessica set sail for Egypt, Piazzi published Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid in 1864. It seemed a very strange thing to do, when we might expect him to wait until his return from Egypt with his reliable measures. This 400-page book would be published within half a year, suggesting an excitable endeavor for Piazzi, who seems to have already made his mind up on the results. Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid became a popular book that would go through 5 editions. The original 1864 edition would subsequently be expanded by further editions published in 1874, 1877, 1880, and 1890. In the 1890 edition, he would devote some time critiquing Flinders Petrie's work at the Great Pyramid, published in 1883. Might matters have turned out differently if Piazzi had not written Our Inheritance before his journey to Egypt? He left himself with little room to maneuver, had his survey of the pyramid resulted in disproving the theories of Taylor. Clearly, this predetermined bias would color his judgment, and maybe he had his eye on results which confirmed his bias and ignored results which did not. Whilst Petrie was surveying the pyramid, he would write to Piazzi about his findings, though Piazzi would reply that he was not prepared to accept any modification of his base measurement. This reluctance to accept any other base measurement continued and was further highlighted in his 1890 edition, where he tries at length to refute Petrie's base measurement. Petrie's base measurement was confirmed by more modern surveys. For pyramidology, the base length should be 9131.05 pyramid inches. A pyramid inch is 1,000th more than an imperial inch. This would agree with Herschel's modular standard. In the image left, this length is divided by the days in the year, which provides a sacred cubit of 25 pyramid inches, or half of Herschel's 50-inch standard. For pyramidologists, this sacred cubit was used to construct the pyramid. The young Flinders Petrie was quite impressed with Piazzi's book. Margaret Drower states, "With youthful self-assurance, he wrote in 1870 to the English Mechanic and World of Science, defending the pyramid theory against its critics, and thereafter became a regular correspondent, ranging himself firmly with the biblical literalists in opposition to the new science. The Great Pyramid he referred to as the grandest writing on earth." Indeed, some years later, in 1874, Petrie would publish his first book, whose title is given above. I have also inserted underneath the title the first page of his book, which shows the support he had for Piazzi and Taylor at the age of 21. This intense interest in the subject likely came from Flinders' father William, who was a devout follower of Piazzi. Indeed, William made plans with Piazzi to travel to Egypt in 1872, though this had to be cancelled due to family commitments. Like Piazzi, William was quite a religious man, and ultimately differences in religious interpretation of the pyramid cooled the friendship between the two families. This falling out resulted in William and Flinders deciding to travel to Egypt on their own, though it would turn out that only Flinders would travel to Egypt in 1880. Piazzi in November 1864 from Holyhead, North Wales, on a 3-week journey to Alexandria, which was largely self-funded. The expedition was certainly well equipped, consisting of some 27 boxes of instruments. Their first port of call was to the British consul, who managed to arrange a meeting with the viceroy, Ismail Pasha, who was quite amenable to Piazzi's request to survey the pyramid, but left the finer details to Mariette Bey, who was in charge of antiquities. Whilst waiting for the necessary permissions and paperwork, Jessica caught a fever, and their budget was being eaten by high costs brought about by what Piazzi termed cotton fever, a condition directly related to the American Civil War, which made cotton white gold as prices soared. At last, they received notice that the governor of Giza would be ready to escort them to Giza on the 7th of January, 1865. On arrival at Giza, the camels, with their boxes of equipment, along with a tent, were placed by the Sphinx, though they thought the location and tent was unsuitable, and so they were escorted to the old tombs that Howard Vyse had used during his work at Giza, and also to a tomb which had been excavated and cleared by Mariette Bey. Hoping for accommodation higher up the plateau and closer to the pyramid, the guide Ali Dobry took the Smyths to other tombs, but none proved suitable, and so they ended up using both the tombs of Howard Vyse and Mariette Bey. Piazzi was a pioneer in photography and took some 166 images whilst in Egypt. Sadly, it would appear that most have been lost. The image left by Piazzi shows the pyramid's northeast corner socket. The standing figure is Mr. Inglis, an engineer who helped Piazzi uncover the corner sockets, while sitting on the socket floor are the two pyramid sheiks, and in the background we have Ali Dobry. According to the pyramidologist Morton Edgar, Ali died in 1904, and as he was said to have worked for Howard Vyse as a 4-year-old basket carrier, he died around age 71. The picture left of Ali was taken by Petrie during his work on the Great Pyramid. Image courtesy of Griffith Institute, University of Oxford. Piazzi and Ali would continue their inspection of the pyramid's interior, where they found the passages covered in dust and fragments of stones. Describing the Grand Gallery, Piazzi states, "Still every surface was thick with white powdery stone dust, and the ramp holes absolutely filled with it. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber had some 2 inches of dust in the bottom, and likewise the floor of the chamber, where care had to be taken in not disturbing it too much. The queen's chamber is described as having a monstrous quarry hole in the floor by the niche, along with a huge heap of stones and rubbish in the chamber's northwest corner, which nearly took up 1/3 of the chamber's height. All this debris had to be cleared, and the floors washed down before the work of measuring could begin." According to Piazzi, each time that they swept the king's chamber, the dust, for the most part, rose in clouds, filled the air, and made their breathing so difficult that they had to leave after a couple of hours of it. And when they went back next day, there was all that raised and flying dust of yesterday, neatly deposited again on floor and coffer and everything else, very much as before. Then when they came to the Grand Gallery and began to sweep out its centuries of dust and clear the ramp holes of their collections of ages, he made out that the limestone powder rose in whirlwinds perfectly volcanic, and they heard travelers entering at the lower end and saying, "What's all this? Dreadful!" and then exclaiming wildly, "Oh, take me out, or I shall die." But the gallant Rees and his little men went on bravely for all that, and worked, they said, until they could see no longer. That is, they worked and he looked on, squatted orientally on the great step, and smoking his long pipe until the air was so thick that there was no escape for the clouds he puffed out of his mouth.